Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an all-new reaction and review. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm taking a look at yet another simulated snuff film from Japan. In fact, this one is one a lot of you guys have wanted me to cover for a long time. You see, this is the second film in the Guinea Pig series. The title is Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh and Blood. Now, mind you guys, there are a lot of different titles for this thing. In fact, when it first was released on home video in the US, its title was Slow Death, The Dismemberment. Some people don't know if it's Flower of Flesh and Blood or Flowers of Flesh and Blood. Nobody fucking knows. So I'm going to stick with Flower of Flesh and Blood just because, well, fuck you, that's why. Alright? I frankly just want to go with something. So, Flower of Flesh and Blood it is. Now, this movie does have a rather fascinating history behind it, and that history is that Charlie Sheen saw this film, and the story as to how he found it, that one changes between tellings, because sometimes he saw it at a stag party, sometimes it was at a bachelor party, sometimes it was at a friend's place. Whatever the fuck the case was, he watched Flower of Flesh and Blood and thought up and down it was an actual snuff film. Charlie Sheen alerted the FBI and they investigated the film. At which point the makers of both this and the original Guinea Pig, both of which came out in 1985, they both had to prove that their films were works of fiction. It's a good thing that they were able to show exactly how they did every single one of the effects. They were able to show the actresses were still fucking alive, all this other happy horse shit. Basically, it's the same thing that happened with Cannibal Holocaust, in the sense that they had to prove that the cast was still alive and everything was a fucking show. So, yeah, this film has got a rather awesome history to it simply because it apparently is so realistic. Charlie Sheen thought he was watching an actual snuff film. So hey, that's kinda sort of a cool history, but now it's time to see if this thing is aged well. Cause guys, I'm gonna tell you, gore films and horror films from the 80s, they have this awful habit of not aging too well. So I'm not sure if these effects are really as realistic as I'm, kind of expecting. But the only way to find out is for me to dive right in and give it a watch. So, without further ado, it's time to kick back, relax, and check out Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh and Blood. You know, guys, I think I know why I liked the first Guinea Pig film. Because within just like a few minutes, you were right into the action. You knew exactly what the fuck was going on, and there was shit happening. We are 5 minutes in, we have a woman chained to a fucking bed. That's it. I'm not even going to count the footage at the start when we see her captured. I'm not going to count the fucking... I'm not even going to count the fucking disclaimer at the start, which announces this thing is faker than shit. All I'm going to say is, we're 5 minutes in, there's been nothing of any real interest. I'm kind of hoping for something here, guys. Okay. I kind of want to say this. That entire effect of the chicken getting its head cut off looked like shit. I just kind of, okay, now we're getting a slow-mo shot of the chicken corpse falling. Still doesn't stop the fact that the actual effect itself was shit. So, what he doped her up with basically doesn't allow her to experience pain, but feels it more as like a pleasurable thing. So now when he tortures her, she's not going to scream in pain. Okay. I'm not entirely certain if such a drug exists. Oh, and wow, there's a little bit of a bulge there in her fucking wrist, dude. You can kind of sort of see where the blood's gonna ooze. Yep. My god, the fucking effects in this movie are awful so far. Funny, I really didn't think that her arm looked that thin when it was still attached to her body, so... Either I am just not remembering how her arm looked when it was still attached to her fucking shoulder, or they really suck at creating props that are the correct size. I don't know, and at this point I really don't fucking care either. You guys can hear this like sawing sound, right? This really dry sounding saw thing, it really doesn't sound like it's sawing into anything wet. Yeah, he's sawing into her leg right now. What's weird is that when he was sawing off her hands, when he was sawing off her arms, it sounded all wet and nasty, but apparently the meat around her leg bones are drier than the fucking Sahara. Jesus Christ. Is it too much to ask for just a little bit of consistency in this fucking thing? I'm really just asking for that, for that fucking much. Guys, so apparently, if a body's lying perfectly prone, and you take an axe and you chop off the head is gonna rocket off and bounce off the nearest wall. You learn something new every fucking day, guys. Jesus Christ. Okay, I really have to ask. Exactly what the fuck is this film series, and what the hell is up with this film series and its fascination with popping out eyes? I mean, okay, yeah, this right here is nowhere near as nasty or as disgusting as, well, it is almost as nasty, but it's nowhere near as disgusting or as nauseating as the eyeball scene in the original Guinea Pig, but still, Jesus Christ, that is fucked up. Well, guys, that was Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh and Blood, and I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I was fucking disappointed, guys. I really, truly was. I wanted this film to be absolutely amazing, partially because I fucking adored the first one. And this thing is such a huge letdown after watching the first. I'm going to tell you that right now. But then again, that's because I'm more into films that actually know how to, how to actually pace out everything. I'm going to start with the writing, as much of a joke as that may seem to be in the case of this film. But the writing in this film, I'm going to talk about, in terms of writing, I'm going to talk about the pacing, I'm going to talk about what little fucking dialogue is here, as well as the actual frame, as well as the framing story told in the fucking disclaimers at both the start and the end of the film. Now, mind you, I'm basing everything here in terms of dialogue and as well as the starting and closing disclaimers. I'm basing these entirely on what was seen in the subtitles of the version I fucking watched. So I don't know how accurate these are, but I will get to the subtitles a little bit later. So at the very start, it comes right out and says that this is not a genuine snuff film. No, it is a fucking reenactment based on film, photos, and a letter supposedly sent to, I believe it was a manga artist, from somebody claiming to be a devoted fan. So it was probably a horror manga artist. At which point then, the artist then went out of his way to try to make a fucking film, utilizing the letter, the photos, and the film itself, and just try to reenact what he thinks all happened with that. Which is why the film starts with a very, very cinematic opening of our victim being kidnapped. Any human being who would see that would obviously know, even if they didn't read Japanese, that this shit is not a fucking snuff film. You wouldn't have close-ups of your victim's face before they've been captured if this was an actual snuff film. Again, I'm also going to get into the whole fucking like Charlie Sheen thing a little later. I want to get through the film itself first, then I'll cover everything else. Alright, So we have that as our framing story. So it basically comes right out and it says that this is not an actual snuff film. I am going to have to give them credit for at least being honest. But it also goes out of its way to completely spoil everything that happens in the fucking film. Because in the opening text, like crawl, I guess I can call it, they come right out and they say, the victim captures her, ties her up, chops her up, and puts her body parts into his personal collection. That's the whole film. The only thing it doesn't tell you is what order he chops off everything. So, yippee. That really is your only fucking thing driving you in there. That is your one lone fucking incentive, is that you don't know what order he's going to be chopping off body parts. But even then, it really doesn't matter because the film is kind of dull. There really is nothing here, and there is no point to care about our victim, because unlike the first film where she felt every bit of the pain, be it physical, psychological, whatever, she felt all of it, and you in turn kind of felt pain for the victim. But here, one of the very first things he does is he dopes her up so that way she doesn't feel any pain. So basically now he's just chopping into what is basically a living like slab of steak. There's nothing there. There really is no point to caring when your victim doesn't fucking care either. I am going to get more onto the victim when I talk about acting. So just basically from a writer's point, they have completely devastated anything even close to feeling fucking sympathy for the victim, because the victim sounds as if she is enjoying being chopped up thanks to the drug that was injected into her. So, yeah, writing in this thing was not that fucking good. Let's talk about the acting. We have a cast of exactly two people. Our killer and his victim. Now, I want to talk about the victim first. Because the victim is a horrible actress. I'm not going to lie. Not only is she creepily like cross-eyed, which makes any close-ups of her face look almost fucking humorous, which again kind of sort of devastates the whole, like atmosphere they were trying to set for this film. But also after she is drugged up and before she is obviously dead from fucking blood loss, she is hamming up all of the pain. Apparently, the fucking drug which was injected into her, which according to our killer, makes her no longer feel pain and now registers pain as pleasure. I guess registers it as almost fucking orgasmic pleasure, because everything from jabbing her in the fucking gut with a goddamn ice pick, all the fucking way down to chopping off her hands, has her writhing and moaning as if she's getting ready to fucking climax. It's really kind of off-putting, and it really doesn't help the general feel of the film. Again, I'm just sort of telling you this. Again, though, that one there's a little bit more the writer's fault for putting in the whole she doesn't feel pain and she only feels pleasure bullshit. Now we have the killer. The killer is the best actor here, but that isn't saying much because you have a cast of only two fucking people. But still, what he does with this is really good. He seriously comes off as a fantastic sociopath, and that is exactly the kind of person you could picture just finding a fucking total stranger, tying him up, chopping him up, filming it, taking fucking photos and sending them out to somebody. Which, again, all of that was probably fucking bullshit too, just to fucking set up for the story. But he plays his role very, very well. So I do have to give the actor props. At least he turned in a somewhat decent showing in a film that is essentially just a big fucking cloying goddamned mass of failure and bullshit. Now, let's talk about one of the things everybody's here for. Special effects. One of the very first effect shots we see is our killer cutting the head off of a chicken to show our victim what he's going to do with her. Now, I've seen footage of chickens getting their heads cut off. In fact, I have a clip of that on Blu-ray because I own Faces of Death on Blu-ray. And I'm going to tell you, when a chicken's head is cut off suddenly, its body begins to writhe because the muscles begin to fucking twitch. Here, when the head is cut off, the body goes totally fucking limp. And when he drops this fucking like chicken corpse, The blood that is oozing out of the neck is so fucking thick, it looks almost as if the chicken is bleeding ketchup, which doesn't help, which once more, it doesn't help with the fucking atmosphere of this film, which it was trying to set this, like, graphic, horrible thing. And then we have a cross-eyed, and then we have a cross-eyed, moaning fucking, victim, who apparently looks almost like she's fucking auditioning for a goddamn, like, sex comedy and not for a horror film. And we have a chicken that bleeds fucking ketchup. There's not much here. In terms of the actual effects, I have already mentioned that once her arm is cut off, the arm that the killer's holding looks really fucking small, which tells me that they didn't know how to actually make props in the correct size. Special effects otherwise are at least somewhat decent. In terms of like close-ups when he actually is cutting off her hands, cutting off her arms, sawing off her fucking leg. It all looks really good, however, most of that is devastated by a god-awful sound. I will get to the sound in just a second. And then we get up to the big moment, which is when he pops out her eye with a fucking spoon. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier, it's not as good as the eyeball scene in the first guinea pig, but it is still nasty as hell, so I do have to give them a little bit of credit. However, he pops out her eye after cutting off her head, and apparently, when you have your hands, your arms, and your legs cut off, and you've lost that much fucking blood, and also when your fucking guts have, and also when your gut has been cut open, and the psycho is sitting there and like fucking around with your guts so much that you are basically vomiting up blood. You still have enough high-pressure blood in your goddamn body to send your head rocketing off your body the second that it's chopped off, with so much force that it is going to leave a splatter mark on the wall that your head hits. Yeah, again, they really weren't going for fucking realism with this thing, you can almost tell. Now, with that said, almost everything is done in close up, because I have a feeling that if they would have done this stuff in a much more like wider angle, it would have probably looked like absolute shit. So I do have to applaud them for at least working around whatever kind of budget they had. However, if you don't have a huge budget, a gore film is probably the last thing you should be fucking looking to make, because gore films, oftentimes, in terms of low-budget style films, they are the priciest of the fucking low budgets, because you have to spend money on guts, blood, and everything else. So if you have all of that and you still don't know how to make fucking like body parts, you're probably pretty well fucked. But at least they were still able to work, around that and make it almost work. It just seems almost suspect that everything is so goddamn close up. But still, I'm going to give them a little bit of credit here. So, now, I want to talk about the sound effects. See, because I mentioned earlier, the very dry sawing sound they used when he was cutting through her fucking leg, as basically if you were sawing through a perfectly dry bone that basically had not had anything wet or meaty on it in ages, compared to when he cut off her hands and her arms and it had this wet, nasty sound to it. The problem, though, is that neither fucking sound worked, because we have that dry sawing, like sawing sound on the fucking leg, and there's literally no hint of cutting through meat, cutting through anything else, just cutting through bone, and the sound effect, it might as well just have been sawing through fucking wood. And then we have the arms, which is this bizarre mix of well, first of all, cutting up apples. You can clearly hear the sound of a knife slicing through an apple, and it's used quite a few times over the course of that. Another sound you hear quite often is something which I can only compare to like a bag of rocks, probably a small bag of wet fucking rocks, and the person is just sitting there, like rolling it around in their fucking hands. And finally, the final fucking sound, which is fucking mixed into this sound, which is used for both cutting off the wrists and the shoulder, I should mention, even though only one of them would actually have that kind of a joint, it basically almost sounds like the sound you get when you pry a chicken leg or a chicken wing off of a body. You hear that really nasty, like, popping noise. They also worked in that, which if you were to take, like, any fucking, like, one of those and use it, it might have worked. And maybe even taking two of them, it might have worked. But take all three of those and you layer them over, it doesn't sound right. It sounds absolutely hideous. And the fact that I am able to pick, and the fact that I'm able to pick out exactly what all three sounds are, tells you that it wasn't even mixed well. So we have a lot of sound issues with this thing. Now, I want to talk about the subtitles, because the subtitles are sort of the thing I was talking about earlier when it says at both the start and the end of the film that this whole film is bullshit. It's all just a fucking reenactment based on footage and images and all this other shit that was sent to somebody. First of all, I don't know if any of the subtitles in this thing are accurate. So, frankly, that could easily have just been bullshit that was cooked up by whoever the hell threw the subtitles on here. And I don't know if these are the commercial subtitles. I don't know if this was a fan sub. I have no idea. Because the fucking video I'm watching, it gives me no sort of info along those lines. But if this is a fan sub, or even if this is a fucking commercial sub, like sub job, the person who did it doesn't know the first fucking thing about timing subtitles. Allow me to explain. When you are adding subtitles onto a film, the object is for the subtitle to appear as it's being said, which means that if there is a pause, your subtitle is gone, and it comes back when they start speaking again. Now, here's sort of the issue. First of all, timing also means that the subtitle pops up as close as it can to when it's being said. Not 3 seconds after the person has started fucking speaking. Now, there are two moments I would like to talk about here. No, actually there are three. I really forgot about this one. This one here is the one that just sort of bothers me the most. I'm gonna do these in the fucking order that they happened in the film. First one was a fucking subtitle. I believe it's when he mentions he's going to cut off her arms. It takes him maybe about 7 to 10 seconds to say that, and the subtitle is on screen for what feels like 2 minutes. So, yeah, the person didn't have a fucking clue when the hell to get that fucking subtitle off there. So we can see what he's saying over the sound of almost total silence, minus the sounds of, minus the sounds of rocks and chicken bones and sliced apple as he's cutting through the arm. Then, very next scene, I believe then like a couple of scenes later when he mentions he's going to play with her guts a little. Again, the subtitle comes in late by about a second. That actually is one thing. Almost every subtitle in this fucking film comes in late. The person didn't know how to fucking time shit in this thing. And again, he talks for about 7 to 10 seconds. The subtitle is on screen for about 3. So you probably won't have a chance to read all of it. You might get a chance to read most of it. And if not for the gimmick of this series where I am not allowed to stop the movie at any fucking time or even fucking rewind it, I would probably have gone back and tried to read that goddamn sub again. Maybe even go as far as to pause it so I could fucking read it. But hey, you know what? The very fact that I have to mention that I would have done that if the rules of this series would have allowed me tells you that somebody fucked up in terms of getting the subtitles on here. Now we have a moment where the subtitles completely ruin the fucking atmosphere of a scene. At the very end, when our killer is putting body parts into his collection, He is reciting what sounds like a poem about man's descent into hell. It is a very beautiful poem if the subtitles are to be believed. Here is the problem. Now the subtitles are just going at a rather nice clip, as if it were being naturally spoken by somebody. However, the audio has been slowed down slightly, and the actor is drawing out what he's saying, which makes the whole thing sound darker and much more ominous. And the subtitles are done before he's even done with his second or third sentence in the poem, or rather, like second or third line in the poem. And you are already done reading it, and you think to yourself, wow, that is just an awesome poem. And then you get to hear it in fucking Japanese. You're like, probably have a lot more impact if they fucking took their time and spaced out all of the subtitles. So it really sort of like destroyed the entire mood of that fucking scene. And again, that one there is not the fault of the filmmakers, it's the fault of whoever the fuck put the subtitles on the stupid thing. Now, I mentioned at the very start of this episode that this right here is the infamous film that Charlie Sheen saw under some fucking circumstance. Again, that part of the story changes depending on who, it basically is depending on who is telling it and what time of fucking year it is. All right? It changes quite often. I would like to say this right now. If Charlie Sheen actually thought that anything in this fucking movie were real, subtitles or no, then he must have been either baked out of his fucking mind, drunk off his ass, or higher than he has ever been, because that's the only way you could look at anything in this film and believe that any of it is fucking realistic. Guys, I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip here when you are watching the film. After her fucking arms are cut off, you can tell that they have her real arms just put down by her side. There is fucking gore planted up a little bit fucking too high for it for it to actually be a fucking arm cut. It goes down, and it basically looks almost like her arm like naturally rests like this on both sides, and you can see the shape of her hands underneath the bedsheet that's covering her body. How the fuck can you watch that, no matter what decade you were in, and believe it's real when you can see the hands and the shape of the arms underneath the fucking bedsheet, along with the fact that the sound effects suck, the fact that the opening and the fucking closing, which by the way the closing is when he finds his next victim, are done in such a fucking cinematic fashion that there's no way in hell they could have been a fucking snuff film. So I'm going to believe that Charlie Sheen only saw maybe a couple of minutes, perhaps maybe the scene where he's popping out the eye, or maybe the scene where he's cutting off the leg. I don't know, something, okay? Or maybe it was like towards the end when he's putting the body parts into the fucking like vats of water. Something. He must have only seen like a part of it and immediately thought, this is a real snuff film. Any human being who could watch this fucking thing from start to finish would know good and goddamn well it is not a fucking snuff film, just basically by the general look of it. And really, I cannot recommend this one, guys. I just can't. If you have the option of watching Flower of Flesh and Blood or watching the original Guinea Pig, go watch the fucking original. It had better pacing, had better writing, it had better fucking special effects, it had better music, what little music was in both of these. Really, it is just a better fucking experience overall, and that's kind of frightening, because this one is the one everybody talks about. This film is the one entry in the series that everybody wanted me to cover, and I wanted to love it. I really did, and I'm so disappointed because the first one was so good. This thing could have been leaps and bounds better, maybe if the filmmakers put a little bit of extra care into it. And I'm going to tell you guys, the version I watched off of YouTube. No, I am not going to provide you with a link for one simple reason. Because I know that if I provide you with a link, there's a good chance that video is going to be flagged and gone very, very quickly. Because I still don't know how in the hell this fucking thing has been able to sit on YouTube for about the last about 5 months or so. and still not be taken down. Because I could have sworn having something this, violent and this gory was not allowed on YouTube as per their basic guidelines. But hey, it doesn't matter. And to the person who uploaded the movie, I'm not sure if you're ever going to watch this, but thank you. I have always wanted the chance to watch this, and well, no matter how fucking let down I am by just the sheer lack of quality this film had, I am happy that I finally had a chance to watch it. So, hey, I mean, that honestly is the positive side to this, is that I was still willing to give this like film a chance. I just wish that it could have been better. So, with that, folks, we come to the close of another reaction and review. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and I will see you all in the near future. Peace.